North Carolina Botanical Garden, and unfortunately the batteries on that appear to be
Oh,
completely
just
dead
use
and
the arrow?
useless, so just use the arrows.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
sorry about that.
Good afternoon. So as Peter said, my name is Damon Waitt. I'm director of the North Carolina Botanical Garden for all of 1 year and 5 days. So what I have to share with you today is what I've learned in the last year. But I did come from an institution, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas, that was affiliated with the University of Texas at Austin. So I do have some previous experience working with faculty and university programs as far as broader impacts, NSF grants, and the like. So if you're not, how many people have been to the Botanic Garden? Oh, that's pretty good. Almost everybody. Encourage you to come because right now it is at peak blooming capacity. So it's the best time to see the garden right now at this time of year. So our mission is that we are a teaching, research, and public service unit of the University of North Carolina. We're one of the centers and initiatives, much like the Moorhead Planetarium. We sit within the provost's office. We report to the vice provost for academic initiatives. And our home mission is to fulfill that university mission by inspiring people to have a better understanding and appreciation of plants and their conservation, and also to make a nice sustainable connection between plants and people and nature. So that's what we're all about. A few things. We've been at it for a long time. The Botanic Garden has a very long history with the university, but over the years we've really developed an outstanding reputation as a university-affiliated botanical garden that integrates conservation across everything it does, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. We also, because the UNC Herbarium, does everyone know what a herbarium is? A herbarium is a library of dried plant specimens that fix biodiversity for plants in certain locations in certain times. And so because of that, we are the region's most comprehensive knowledge center for information about the southeastern flora. And then because we're also a public botanic garden, we provide a wide array of public outreach and educational opportunities that encourage people to get outdoors. We're trying to cure something called nature deficit disorder, which is basically kids not spending any time outdoors anymore. And we do that through programs, but it's all scientifically based. So that's a little bit about our identity. And I did mention we do have a very long history. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it goes all the way back to 1903. And the very first professor of botany at UNC was told by President Venable, well, he was asked, there was a little 5.5 acre swampy, muddy area on campus that they were using for the faculty were using to graze their cattle, apparently. And the president asked Dr. Coker if he could do something about it. And that started the Coker Arboretum. I think everybody's probably been to the Coker Arboretum right here on campus, I hope. And it's also in full bloom. So it has a long history, and we're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary this year because in 1966 we opened the main garden, the trail system, to the general public, and that's at 100 Old Mason Farm Road. So I mentioned that we are known as a conservation garden. If you were to look at, there's approximately 500 public botanic gardens in the United States. Of those, about a 10th are university-affiliated botanic gardens. Of those, another 10th are conservation-themed university-affiliated botanic gardens. So you're only going to come across a garden like this every 1 in 100 public garden visits, basically. They're pretty rare. And the main site, the display gardens at 100 Mason Farm Road, are actually a native plant botanical garden. So we feature the native plants of North Carolina in various habitat displays at the main garden. You can literally walk across North Carolina by going through our coastal plain habitat, through the Piedmont into the mountain habitat. So But these conservation principles underlie everything that we do. We do ecological research, we do natural area protection, we do land management, we teach about sustainable gardening practices, and it's a long list, but it really underlies the entire garden. So just very quickly, you kind of know who you might approach depending on your own field. We're divided up into an administrative services department, which may not interest you very much unless you are writing us into a grant proposal. You might want to talk to our financial people. But we have 4 key program areas. That's conservation, education, horticulture, and then basic taxonomic research. And so those are the areas where we have expertise. We have PhDs as directors of 2 of those areas. And I'm also a PhD botanist, population geneticist myself. So I'll go through a little bit. So John Randall, Dr. John Randall is the Director of Conservation. I'll tell you a little bit about what he does. Alan Weekly is the Director of Research in the UNC Herbarium. Nancy Easterling directs our education program, and James Ward our horticulture program. So if you were to approach us about something involving broader impacts with your work, those would be the people. So we do have these 4 core program areas that feed off of one another at the Botanic Garden. And so, for example, the land conservation, the conservation team does land management. They are involved in rare plant reintroductions, restoration, ecology. They also manage a very large seed program, collecting seeds of both common and rare species, and banking those seeds at our own seed bank, but also sending them into national germplasm labs. And they also participate in our public outreach. So, for example, these are threatened and endangered species. They're on the endangered species list. The plant conservation program at the North Carolina Botanical Garden is designated by the Center for Plant Conservation to take care of these species in North Carolina. The conservation program also manages the garden's lands, and this is where, especially if you're a field biologist or ecologist, you might have some more interest in us. So overall, on this map, you can kind of see the light blue in the top middle. That's the campus. And the areas in green and brown are lands managed by the North Carolina Botanical Garden. So Coker Arboretum, I mentioned. Battle Park, the 100-acre park adjacent to campus, is under the garden's management. The Coker Pinetum, the main display gardens I mentioned on Old Mason Farm Road, but also several hundred acres in the Mason Farm Biological Reserve and Parker Preserve. All of the lands in brown are conservation easements that we manage on behalf of our supporting foundation. So there are literally over 1,100 acres of gardens and natural areas that we can provide access to researchers to do work or to do activities that involve broader impacts. It's a lot of land in Chapel Hill. And this is just showing you some of the different totals. About 800 acres that's managed and owned by the state or the University of North Carolina, but managed by us. And then another 300 plus acres of conservation easements and conservation lands that are we manage on behalf of our foundation. I mentioned education, and this could be a venue for broader impacts for different. We have a very robust education program. We basically cover you from cradle to grave when it comes to education and outreach on anything having to do with plants, ecology, plant conservation, environmental science. And this is just a list of some of the programs that are for youth and family. We also have school group visits. We go into schools, and we have a very robust adult informal education program, including certificate programs in botanical art and illustration and native plant studies. So another thing we do is we host a lot of professional conferences, symposia, things like that at our facilities at the main garden, and I'll show you a little bit about that. We constantly are rotating exhibits throughout our facilities for the public. We have a number of places like the DeBerry Gallery, the Peg Exhibit Hall, where we can feature content that's produced by researchers if we can help translate that into the public and it's appropriate for a botanic garden. And then we also are involved in a lot of community outreach. So the Carolina Campus Community Garden here on campus is a program of the Botanic Garden, and that's where we work with students, faculty, staff, other volunteers come, and they literally vegetable garden, and then the produce from that garden is distributed to housekeeping staff on campus. We have a program called Horticultural Therapy, where we work with people with brain injuries and various other kinds of ailments to work with plants, and it's been shown to have a good effect on their health. We go into hospitals and do environmental science at the bedsides of immunocompromised kids who can't get out in nature, who can't touch soil, and we have special environmental lessons that we bring to them right at their hospital bed. So we work in the hospitals, and probably we will become responsible for the Edible Campus initiative here on campus, which is part of that larger Food for All theme that the Chancellor has, and we'll start working to grow edible or provide plants with edible products for the campus, the faculty, the staff, and students right here on campus. So I mentioned our main garden. This is just a schematic of what it looks like. It consists of display gardens, 50 acres of nature trails, Carolina Campus Community Garden. I mentioned several of these already. Mason Farm Biological Reserve. And these are just our demonstration areas, our publicly visited sites. And they vary from very high intensity managed sites like the main gardens to more natural areas like the biological preserve, where we use ecological tools to manage like fire and mowing and some other management techniques. A long list of our different kinds of display gardens. I won't go into that. As far as research, most of the research that we're involved with involves alpha level taxonomy in the UNC herbarium. And it's the largest herbarium in the Southeast with over 800,000 specimens. It's mostly engaged in specimen digitization right now as part of larger national networks to get the herbaria of the United States digitized and accessible to all researchers. We publish floras and field guides out of that, out of all the content that's collected at the herbarium. And we also teach university classes. I bring this up because just recently one of our largest projects, which is the Flora of the Southeast, I should have brought it with me. It's about a 10-pound book that's this thick, was recently translated into an app so that you can carry it around with you in the field and you can key out plants based on what you're seeing right in front of you remotely. And I think there's more opportunities for app development. I mean, everybody wants that app where you just point your phone at a plant and it tells you what it is.
Is that what it does?
No, no. There are a few apps out there that use that, like that facial recognition software to help you ID plants, but they're not very sophisticated yet. You have to put the leaf on a white sheet of paper and take a picture, and then it's only as good as the plants that it's already got scanned in there. So. Actually, I hope that app never comes because then all the botanists would be put out of work. So.
You can sort of do it in Google, though. You can Google search an image.
You can. I mean, I often do that. If I see something, I don't know what it is, I'll just kind of remember its characteristics and just start typing that into Google, and you'd be amazed.
Take a photo of the image and Google search the image.
Oh. I'll have to try that with a plant.
And music.
We have some really excellent facilities at the Botanic Garden for meetings, classes, workshops, things. We don't have a maker space, but maybe we should talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah. Nature Builds is a kind of maker space that I don't know if you're familiar with, where you just gather natural objects all in one place, turn kids loose, and at the end of the day, they've built a village or something out of all the materials.
Survivor.
It ends up being
Arboretum first edition.
it ends up being Lord of the Flies by the end of the day. So anyway, but we have, this is the state's in the university system's first LEED Platinum building, the James and Allen Education Center. And that gives you a clue how much we're into sustainability, complete with geothermal heating and cooling and rainwater collection and solar power. I won't even walk into this building with a styrofoam cup for fear of being kicked out. So it's got great meeting spaces, like I said, in classrooms and things like that. And we'd like to create on the site of the main garden. Right now the herbarium is on the 4th floor of Coker Hall, almost the entire 4th floor. You can imagine these specimens are stored in large refrigerator-sized cabinets, and so our next goal will probably be for our capital campaign to raise the $25 or $30 million we'd need to build a center for the study of southeastern plant biodiversity at the main garden that would house the herbarium, that would house the conservation program, the seed collection, and things like that, and really become a mecca for botanists and taxonomists and ecologists in the southeast as a place to do work. And it should look something like that. So that's coming down the pipe. So as far as where I think we might be able to help in terms of broader impacts and NSF research is we definitely have a venue and resources to help faculty translate their intellectual merit for the public. Especially, a good example is taking that 10-pound flora of very technical information and turning it into an app that anybody can use. I feel like we have, and when it comes to plants, we've got that covered for you. We can also support your classes, your grad students, as an outdoor classroom or a laboratory at our field sites. We have research facilities at our field sites. We can do long-term data sets, ecological research at Mason Farm and some of our other properties, so we can be a venue for that field-based type research. And I think we're really good, especially at making students future ready, in the sense that we know that not every student is going to become a high-powered academician later in life, and that we have good career experience in these disciplines of ecology, conservation, biology, and botany on careers, non-academic careers, that have an academic piece to them. So I think we're especially good, and we do that through internships, work study, and we'd also serve on graduate committees as well. So that's another place I think we can help. We can serve as guest lecturers in plant science and conservation and ecology, and facilitate public service opportunities for students. We can plug them into all of those different educational opportunities we provide at the garden when you have something that makes sense in terms of broader impacts for what we do. So, for example, right now, we're working with Alan Herbert on a citizen science project called Caterpillars Count. Have you heard about this one? Where they go out, students go out, or the public goes out, and they document different kinds of caterpillars. He's interested in looking at caterpillars from the perspective as forage for birds, and seeing if climate change is changing the life cycle of caterpillars and their distribution, which could then in turn impact bird populations who depend on those caterpillars for forage. So we're a field site for that initiative, for that citizen science piece. We've got breeding bird censuses taking place at Mason Farm. We're working on a field guide to the wildflowers of the Atlantic Southeast. Again, that's taking that very dense botanical knowledge and putting it into a field guide form that you can flip through and find plants. And we're working with Joel Kingsolver right now on his NSF grant, the broader impact piece, which involves doing butterfly surveys out at Mason Farm. So we have the field sites, I guess is what I'm saying, if you have the research that's applicable and you want to take it out into the field. So thank you. That's a quick overview.